stories? No. All right, I'll tell you a story.
Dead Reckoning focuses a lot on writing, but you can tell a story without writing a tremendous amount. And I think one of the first things that I noticed about you was that you do write a bit with your social media following and stuff, and you tell a lot about your family history. So let's start with that first question I fired you away. Why do you think stories are important?
I think that's pretty cool that you're reading that stuff too. I think stories are important. One, if I just look at my own family history, as I'm a half-breed, so my mother's Native. My mother is Muscatero Apache. My dad is a white cowboy from San Diego that became a mountain man in Montana. So, just stories in general, whether they are. And I'll kind of tailor this towards like some veteran kind of audience or whatever to give them that understanding. But a lot of times, when you look at tactics and techniques that we use on the battlefield or ways that we train and such, I mean, those are essentially, you're just telling a story. So sometimes those stories that those old guys have, especially when they get into the tactics that they use or the things that they did, I mean, that passes on from generation to generation. And you have what we have now is, what the Ranger Handbook is, like the standard for the infantrymen on the ground. Those started off as guys sharing stories, AARs that went in their stories on the battlefield and then put into written documents that become, doctrine and the standard. So that to me is why storytelling is important. And, from my Native background, it's like, well, we didn't write everything down. We didn't have all these books and stuff. So we had people and elders that would constantly hold on to these stories and tell stories to educate, whether it was on a tactical level and, how exactly are you hunting something or how are you training horses or whatever you're doing, all the way to just, almost like religious base in teachings and practices you should have to be a good person, to be a good member of the society.
But do you think you got a lot of that, or do you think you had to kind of search it out on your own?
I was very blessed. I was fortunate enough. I got a lot of that because, and just to give you a quick insight of my family history, my grandmother, so on my Native side of the family, my great grandmother, my grandmother, my mother's father, as well as his siblings. So my mom, excuse me, I'm twisting my words around. My mother's mom and my mother's father both went to residential boarding schools. So a lot of people don't know about those and what it was, but it's basically the epitome of cancel culture of, they thought they could educate the Indian out of the natives and basically allow them to inculcate in a white society. A lot of that was done through religious means, through the Catholic Church. I'm not here to bash on Catholics, but I mean, there's a lot of evilness that's gone on in that church, since it's started. I'm Christian, I'm not Catholic. So they went to that school, and basically what happened was they would remove all their traditions from them. They wouldn't allow them to pray, to worship, to speak their language. They had to cut their hair. So they really wanted them to become, Americans essentially, and get rid of the traditional ways. So that being said, my grandmother moved when she was pregnant with my mom to San Diego, and she went to San Diego County, lived in the mountains up by Julian, and just wanted her kids to not have to go through that, have to go to those schools and whatnot. But if anybody knows anything about that part of San Diego County, there's probably 10 Indian reservations within like a 25-mile radius. So it's not like my grandmother escaped it, right? So my mother ends up going to same basically kind of boarding schools out by I want to say it was out by Pomona or Ramona. If I'm not mistaken. So anyway, that I add that because those storytelling and those things were very important. So not all the stories that I've learned were just from the Apache side of things. It was from all these other natives that my mother became friends with that she met in school or just lived in the area where she lived in San Diego. And then my mother was, after she graduated high school, she moved to Montana. And when she moved to Montana, she was adopted into the Assiniboine tribe by a man named Harris Rock, who is like another grandfather to me. So all the traditions and everything I was raised in as a kid were very much, they're all Assiniboine traditions. I don't know anything Apache. My grandmother was very ashamed of what happened to her and never talked about it until she was in her 90s and dying. She kind of opened up a little bit about it. So that was a really long way to get into, the storytelling that I learned from the elders, from that I heard people talking about, were all from the Assiniboine tribe. But I think it's very important because that also allowed me to get into tradition, to learn things that I might not have learned, being in that kind of that product of that boarding school system. My grandmother basically inculcated with the Mexican American community. She did learn Spanish at the boarding school. And I do have a little bit of Spanish blood in me, from obviously, the conquistadors. But so my grandmother was raised like a Mexican. So I had a really, really cool upbringing as a kid where, my dad's like white side of the family are these very hard, tough, gritty cowboys. And my mother's native side of the family were kind of like Mexicans that are also Indian. So very multicultural, very cool background in my family. And then getting back to the storytelling piece of this, just looking at it as what I do now and what I want to be, when I grow up, I say, is a cowboy. Some of the stories that just old cowboys talk about sitting around the fire has kept me out of horse wrecks or bad instances, because they're sharing what happened to them. Mm-hmm. And you're just listening, you're just soaking it all in. And it kind of goes back to like that Ranger handbook, if you will, where you have these guys telling you what they did and what they did wrong or what they did right to get out of a sticky situation. And that has helped me. I've been out in the middle of nowhere by myself in the mountains, and had to actually implement some of the things I've heard old guys talk around the fire. And if I didn't hear that story, I might have put myself in a bad spot, or I wouldn't know what to do. So I think that's just a very tangible way of explaining why storytelling is important. Not only does it keep traditions, but it also has a lot to do with training and techniques and keeping those things alive as well.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about like the importance of oral history there too, right? Like I can read, you and I can both read all of the books, about residential schooling, which like I didn't know about until after I got out of the Army, once I started school. But like, we're not going to get everything, right? And right. You can carry on like all of your grandmother's stories, but like you still won't fully experience everything, but you'll experience probably a lot more from her, the stories that she did share with you, based on those things, rather than, or even just the way that she didn't. I mean, I think silence is a form of oral history too. And, learning that dynamic in asking about the stories. So, because I was going to ask, like, totally they probably had some. You were talking about like the areas that she lived in and stuff, and your Spanish side too, and like they probably had like some common ground with like the fallout from the missions and stuff too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, you look at. I'm really, really big into history. I love history, and when I say I love history, I love American history. I'm not a real big fan of world history. I study warriors and warrior class of people. And I think that's why American history to me is so exciting and so cool, because it wasn't that long ago, but we also all come from and derive from the greatest warriors the planet's ever seen, whether that's on the native side or that's, Vikings or the conquistadors. And it sounds harsh, right? And a lot of people don't like that. Especially kind of the woke culture nowadays, they don't want to recognize things. But when you look at the reason why I'm bringing history into it is when you look at the Spanish, right? A lot of people always talk about, Western expansion and colonialism, and they want to make it like it's these white Europeans that came to the Americas and moved across the Western United States and conquered, the tribes. The reality of it was in I think it was 711 AD, the Moors conquered the Iberian Peninsula.
Mhm.
People don't know who the Moors are. They're from North Africa. So a bunch of black dudes on horses were these badass warriors, and they conquered the Iberian Peninsula. So everyone in Portugal, Spain, Italy, all their horsemanship, everything they learned, their warrior class of those guys were from North Africa. They also didn't bring women, and they stayed. So when you do a 23andMe and you're from Portugal, you have a bunch of North African in you. Well, that's where the term mulatto comes into play. So you fast forward, a couple hundred years later, when the conquistadors are landing in Central America, and the Spanish literally marched from Guatemala to Canada and then from Guatemala to Chile. It wasn't a bunch of blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guys. It was a bunch of big mixed race badass warriors who were mulattoes.
Yeah.
And then you add, them almost kind of, involving natives. I think a lot of people also look at Native American history, and we think of one specific type of native. And that also really bothers me, because most people think of, living in teepees, hunting buffalo, kind of Plains Indian, big, tall, skinny Sioux warriors, but, or like the Apache, because there's, pictures of Geronimo and what him and his warriors did. But the reality is you had so many different types of people. They looked different. They spoke different languages. They lived different means and way of life. And when these Spaniards came in Central America, they found massive cities and these huge populations. So I don't think it was this, just this conquering class. I do think they inculcated a bit with society. And the reason for that is just look at people's skin color today. So as we continue talking through this history of where the conquistadors march, I mean, everything in California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado is all either named a native name or a Spanish name when you think of mountains or cities or things that go on in there. There's even a lot of tribes, especially in California and in Arizona, that have a lot of Spanish names in them. What they are, like Los Lobos is in San Diego, right? That's a Spanish word, as Spanish as it gets. And then when you look at just the color of people from, California, all the way, like I said, those Western states, and then down in all the way through Chile, they're brown for a reason, right? Like, because they didn't have this big Northern European expansion into that part of the continent. So the reason I'm saying all this and sharing it is because, yes, I love history, but I think it's so convoluted in how horrible war is, how many things tie into it, how we're all closer together than we are different. And I hate when people really try to put an umbrella on something and be like, oh, it was white colonizers did this to Indians. No, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
That isn't everything that happened. Some Indians also fought with white settlers and fought with them, against them, for them. I mean, you're looking at this ultimate racist survival that happened in our continent, a few hundred years ago. So I think we have the ability as Americans now to really study that warrior culture. We've honored it in our military, all of our tactics and techniques on guerrilla warfare. We're the best in the world at it. And there's a reason why. It's because we use that starting from King Philip's War, all the way to the scouts and the Apache scouts, World War I era. So
why do you think it's so important to distinguish? Like, I mean, you're talking about like breaking down those like blanket, the blanket blaming. Like, why do you feel like that's important to you?
I feel like it's important because, whether you look at different native tribes, you could be, I don't know the name of the tribe. I wish I had it in my memory. But there was a tribe in California who literally they got their waters back and some land back that they had been fighting for. And they literally just turned around like an entire species of salmon that were, about to go extinct, because they used their traditional ways of who they were as fishermen and this very coastal tribe who is so connected to the sea. That tribe is way different than where I'm from. In Montana, the Assiniboine, they're horsemen, they're warriors, they are a different type of native. So we don't speak the same language as those Indians in California who are primarily fishermen and live off the land and live off the sea. if we flip those roles, 200 years ago, and you took an Assiniboine warrior to California and one of their warriors in Montana, I mean, would they even survive if they didn't have the village to depend on? Because they don't know. It's a completely foreign thing. So I think it's important for natives to reflect on that and understand that, because that's your tradition. That's who you are, right? My traditions and things that I practice doesn't necessarily mean that's what Hopi people believe in and they do. So I think that's important to keep that side of the culture alive. And then the reason why I don't like the umbrella effect is because, especially in our country, you had, whether it's, you name the race of people, whether they're, it was African American, Africans, Irish, Italians, doesn't matter. There is a subset, like, culture there that I think really, really makes America so cool. And people who didn't serve in the military have a hard time understanding this. But I think people who served in the military clearly get that, because you will see a white country kid from Alabama be best friends with a black kid from Brooklyn, New York, and just bond and love each other and have this brotherhood of two completely different people and ideologies and the way they grew up. But the military allows them to see the likeness in each other and really and be brothers. So where else in this country are you going to have some white hunting fishing country kid from Alabama that's best friends with a black kid from Brooklyn, New York? So I think that unless you've felt that and you've experienced that, sometimes it is easy for Americans to just want to blanketly umbrella something and say, well, this is all bad or this is all good. Without really understanding the nuances that go on into different areas of the world, of our country, as well as traditions, families, your background, all those things matter. And you can't just umbrella it. I think you're really taken away from how awesome we are as a country and a melting pot and what we've done by stripping that away and trying to umbrella it all.
Yeah. I mean, and it goes, you can take it back to the residential schooling and the Catholic Church. Like, it's not really enough to just say, like, the Catholic Church is bad. It's like when people spout off conspiracy theories about, like, one group controlling everything, like that doesn't actually make sense. No one's that efficient, especially the U.S. government. Like, we just can't, we just can't, I can't put all my eggs in that basket. So when you talk about something like residential schooling and only blame the Catholic Church, there were so many other people involved in that. They for sure probably had the biggest hand, especially like in the direct impact that it had on people. But there were so many other people involved as well. That you're right. Like, if you only like blanket blame, one group of people, then you're ignoring the rest of it, right? And you're missing pieces.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, we literally just saw this firsthand, the last few years in our country where, people who wanted to be vaccinated versus people who didn't want to be vaccinated, where, people can look at that and say, well, you're evil. Like, who would own slaves, or who would hate natives, or who would hate Indians, or who would think this? But the reality is, if you're educated to a certain point and you're told and you're fed all this information, you're going to take that as, your perception is your reality. So if you're told that all natives are bad and they all want to kill you, every Indian's a savage, like, that's what you're going to believe. You're not going to see the humanity in them. And again, the reason why I brought in that COVID thing was because we literally saw people doing that to each other in our own country that didn't have anything to do with race or anything. It was literally just like, if you're not wearing a mask in a certain place, you're allowed to be cussed at and treated like absolute crap. Or you're not allowed into a certain place because you don't have a document saying that you are you're vaccinated. And that was the same thing we saw, Jim Crow laws, Jim Crow era. Just happened to be, you didn't have to pull out a piece of paper to prove something. They could look at the color of your skin. And let me add this too. I'm not comparing the way people are treated COVID to, the atrocities that we have seen in our country and some of the really horrible things like Jim Crow laws and such. Just giving that as a slippery slope and how things can start to go down that path and how easy it is for people to not see the humanity in others and see them for people, to just see them as bad and umbrella everything is, me against you.
Yeah. No, it's been a wild couple of years, and that was, I mean, really like the once masks started coming off. I know there were like, there were a couple experiences I had where like people assumed, where like masks were optional in stores and stuff. You would go in, and no matter how you felt, like a store owner would like ask you to put on a mask, and like my thing was like, I mean, I don't have one, but if you need me to put one on to come in your store, like I'd love to give you my patronage. And they were like shocked, like that I didn't scream at them. So it's like there was no, most of the issues that we have in this country right now, there's no like in between. It's one side or the other, and it's extremes.
Absolutely.
But yeah, man,
It's weird to see that too, because there's so much information available to you, but it's also, when you do look at the way information is garnered, it's like, if you Google something, they can hide something, way down the list on what you're Googling, and kind of, they only want you to see this or see that. And there's just so much of that, like, that does feed into not conspiracy theorist stuff, but does feed into the misinformation or how you interpret the story. And, back to storytelling, if I witness something and you witness something, we're going to have two different versions of what we both witnessed, depending on, our angle that we saw, or the things that we've been through in our lives too, the trauma we've dealt with, will also allow you to express a different version of that same story. And I think that because of social media, because of the news, because of everything that's going on, it's very easy to forget that as Americans. And it's like, no, I read it once, or I heard it here, and that's what it is. And you can see that clearly with, Palestine and Israel, and how people are taking certain sides and just misquoting history and saying all kinds of crap that doesn't make sense. And that's from both sides, whether that's the Israeli side or the Palestinian side. Which is pretty crazy to see, especially when that information is right in front of you if you're willing to look for it.
Right. It's there's a lot going on, we keep falling down the same wormholes with not fact finding and eating up misinformation, or trying to just like be so vigilant about misinformation that we're not looking at what's available to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the other questions that we had kind of discussed before was what's your favorite part of a story? So we get why you like stories, why stories are important to you, how stories have come to play a role in your life. If you had to choose a part of a story that's the most important, what is it?
I think the coolest thing, or my favorite part of a story, especially when it's a true story and it's about life and about events, is that that story, it never ends. It never. It's an endless story. It could be an endless book. And I'll take my own life, and give you an example of that. Is, was I a Green Beret in Special Forces? Do I have multiple combat rotations to Iraq, Afghanistan? I do. But those are chapters of my life, or maybe one big chapter or a few long chapters. It's not the entire book and who I am. It helps add to, the story of me. And even when I get old and I die, it's like, does my story still exist? Yeah, as long as my kids and my grandkids tell that story and they talk about me, or for the next 4 or 5 generations, maybe I'm able to impact my community on a level, and not comparing myself to Martin Luther King, but look at Martin Luther King, right? Like, how long has he been passed away? He now has great grandkids. So he's got 3 generations of storytellers and people that tell his story. And he was so effective in his community that even the community and people want to tell his story about who he was. So I think that's the coolest part of the story, is that the reality of it is, if it doesn't end, and it doesn't end with death, it doesn't begin with life, with birth. It's just this awesome, really kind of, cliche way of saying, like a never ending story. Right. And as it's cool as you want to make it, because the sky's the limit, and you can be whatever you want to be and do whatever you want to do and impact people. How you have that ability to do that. So I think that's really cool.
Man, yeah, solid answer. I love your little disclaimers too, dude. I'm not comparing myself to Martin Luther King. Just in case, dude.
I just really like that guy. He's pretty badass dude.
He sure is. I mean, I think, like, as far as it being a never ending too, like, you can like, that's akin to your your family history and the military history within your family, and how how you're doing what your dad did right now. But you also followed in the footsteps of other family members in the military, and eventually you'll probably be that. For your family, like you'll be a piece in that long line of history, that people will talk
Absolutely.
about, from your grandfather all the way to you, and then from the military to cowboy and stuff. So what do you think, on that note, is the most important part of your story, whether it's to you or to other people? Like what's the most important part of your story?
Warriors. We're still here. We still exist. I think that, especially looking at today's society, and how soft we are, that old saying of, forget how it goes. Now I feel like George Bush. Well, you fault, my fault, potato. But where it's like, strong men create, weak times create strong men, and blah blah. I don't know the saying. Fumbling it up pretty good.
Hard times, hard men, or
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like hard times create hard men. Easy times create soft men. We are seeing that. But I think that the reason why I say the most important part of my story is warriors and warrior society is because we haven't gone anywhere. There are still families like mine, raising children to be warriors. That's downplayed a lot in our society because everyone wants it. It's so easy that we can cry and complain about things that don't freaking matter at all. If you want to identify as a fucking toaster, I don't care. Just don't mess with kids. Just be moral. You want to be a toaster? Do your thing. But and I think that in society, it's like, it's so easy that now we want it to be important, right? Like, no, I want you to know that I'm a toaster, and I want it to be important to you. It was not important to me, and those types of things I think are a bigger distraction, and they get to where we are now when you look at, people openly supporting terrorist organizations, or, openly being racist, whether that's white, black, whatever. We're allowing these things to happen without understanding that, back to, regardless of your skin color, where you're from and who you are from the land. Whether you're white, your Polish ancestry, you had some of the most badass, I think they're the Hoosier horse soldiers in Poland. Like, no matter what your background is or where you're from, you come from a very warring class of society of people. That blood is in your veins. Mm-hmm. And then we basically harvested all that in America and tied it together with the most badass warriors the planet's ever seen. You look at, I don't want to go back into history again, but you look at the horsemen, you look at what some of these tribes and natives were able to do, fighting this massive advanced technology force in the army. And then looking at how the army basically transforms itself into fighting with and using tactics they learned from natives. So all that being said, the way I was raised as a kid was, I knew I was going to be a soldier. It was my calling. It's what the Creator made me for. But that doesn't have to be everyone. But the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. I don't like that saying. I like that everyone needs a village, and you have to be a member of your village. So I might be the fiercest warrior that ever lived, but if there's only one of me in that village, I'm going to get massacred when I run out on the battlefield by myself. You can be the best hunter the village has ever seen, but if you're not willing to teach, coach, and mentor the next hunters coming up behind you, your village will only eat while you're there, and you have the ability to be the best hunter that village has ever seen. So right. We all need this support system. We all need to understand where we plug into our village or our community, if you will. So society wants to take those things away, right? And tell you that you shouldn't be a blue collar plumber. Well, who's going to fix your toilet, or who's going to fix the plumbing in your house when it goes bad? So I say those things because you need to be able to figure out where you plug into your community, but also don't forget, that you are a warrior. You have to defend that village. You have to assist your community in the best way that you can. And I think when I look at my life, yes, I was raised for that. If you asked me when I was 3 years old what I was going to be, I would tell you I was going to be an airborne ranger. And every kid doesn't get raised that way. Every kid's, not going to have a crazy cowboy for a dad and a badass Indian lady, Apache lady for a mom. But we can't stop raising warriors. We can't, stop that in our society, because the reality is the world's really, really fucking cruel, and the rest of the world hates America. And back to, because it's hot right now, Palestine and Israel. You can say what side you prefer or agree with one side or the other, but the reality is what Americans don't understand is you don't have a dog in the fight. You don't have a choice to pick what you want. You literally have a radical agenda, and countries and state, the talking heads of their state saying that they want to end America and come after you. So you could be, regardless of your skin color, regardless of your religion, your ideology, you can be Muslim. They don't care. They're coming after you. They hate you too. And I think that as Americans, we need to get back and understand that we are warriors. We have that ability. And I'm just rambling, but I think that's the most important part of my story. And that's something I try to share with my own children on my social media, or what I'm doing is never forget where we come from. We have the ability to be this very unique culture that comes from all walks of life. However, we blend better than any other place in the world. There's no other country on the planet that allows, a Black Muslim to be best friends with a white Christian kid. And the reality is people don't understand that. They don't know. So I think it's very important that veterans of all walks of life in our country, religions, skin colors, relay that message and share that and continue to be warriors, even though they're not physically in the military anymore. Be a warrior for your community, be a warrior, and showcase that, because it is going away and it's dying.
Dude, it's apparent, and it's one of those things where you have like a dying class. And we're seeing the end of Vietnam veterans, just like we saw, the end of World War II veterans. And eventually, especially with the way, not to hop on another soapbox, but the way that we're seeing suicide rates and cancer rates within the military community is just devastating. So we may leave sooner than those generations did. But
I think that what you just said, to me, it ties back into being a warrior, right? And I try to kind of preach a little bit of this, especially with the veteran suicide. The first stance of the Ranger Creed says, recognizing that I volunteered as a Ranger, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession. So, you're sitting there, you're being sad about your buddy who had a great death, who died next to people he fucking loved, died doing something he volunteered for and he wanted to be and wanted to do. Don't take that away from him. Honor him and be a fucking warrior for your community and live as hard as you fucking can. So the veteran suicide, to me, shit does piss me off a lot, because it's like you didn't get told what to do. You didn't get forced what to do. You chose to be a warrior. And you need to live for your friends that had a good death and they died. They knew what they were doing. They knew exactly what they were doing. And it's easier said than done. And I'm not saying I don't struggle with it myself, but you got to fucking live, man. Live hard. If you stop being a warrior, you'll sit on yourself. You'll turn into a big fucking pussy. All the shit we talk about, all the people you don't like, blue-haired person that thinks it's a toaster, you're acting just like them when you sit in your feelings and forget who you are and forget where you come from.
Right on, man. Yeah, it's such a complex issue, but I think you're right. I think it's, be brave, be courageous, just put one foot in front of the other. There's a lot of things you can do. And
I get it. There's medications and there's a litany of problems that can from your diet to,
Dude, again with the blanket thing, and like blaming everything on one thing.
Blanket that either, but
no, not at all. So I think a lot of people talk talk a real good game about like, continuing the fight, continuing, to be a warrior, continuing. And then a lot of people also talk about, like, well, sharing my story. You're doing both with War Party. So talk a little bit about that. Yes, and how that comes into, being a warrior and being a storyteller. Cause it really is. I mean, it's a solid combo of both, and you're still fighting for people, on a different level.
Yeah. So I retired from the Army. I was getting ready to do a bunch of anti-human trafficking work. My resume, just like most guys in the community, it's pretty easy to pick up contract work. Something I always, wanted to do. My mother was very involved in assisting women, and not necessarily in the anti-trafficking side, but my mother and father both did a lot for women in the community, and just families in the community who were down and out or in abusive situations. So I knew, like, I need to serve, and I need to continue to do that and create my own purpose. And you hear all these veterans talk about purpose, and something I was worried about, my mental health struggle, and how was I gonna react after, one day being this really cool dude in the hallway to just being a regular dad now that I'm retired. So I started War Party Movement, which essentially is just a t-shirt company, an apparel company. And I was using the money to help conduct investigations for missing loved ones, mostly on Indian reservations. MMIW stands for Missing, Murdered, and Indigenous Women. Just a couple of statistics. It's really hard to track because of all the nuances that go on in the Native communities on and off the reservations. But the last study they did was in 2016. There's 5,172 missing or murdered women. In 2016, the DOJ only logged 116 cases. So, I mean, you're only looking at 116 families that were told, yes, your loved one is missing, or yes, they are murdered, and yes, we're going to do something about it. The other, do the math, over 5,000 families are just out there flapping in the wind. Right. So I would just started with just trying to help families, search and rescue efforts, or someone's missing. Hey, yeah, I'll come out there and drive around or hike around or ride around the horse, whatever I need to do to try to help you. And that kind of snowballed into something bigger and something cooler, where it was like a lot of people in the veteran community really assisted me. One, whether it was just social media, a veteran reaches out and says, hey, man, if you ever need anything, this is where I live. And I've met a lot of cool friends from doing that. And I've had a lot of really cool veterans be able to go out on searches and whether they're Native or non-Native, go assist Native families and assist people that needed their help. Mm-hmm. And what I would do is the money from the t-shirt sales, let's say you're, where you live out in California, there's a missing Native girl, and you're like, yeah, I'll go in the mountains. I'll connect with, hike around or connect this family. And I'll send you a couple $100, cover your gas and cover your fees, or maybe any special equipment you might need while you're out there. And use your skill set as a, whatever it is, a medic or infantryman or Navy SEAL, whatever, to go out and help these families. So that's how it all started. And then when I always bring up the messaging is with the War Party Movement was I wanted people to, no one talks to their neighbors anymore. No one assists people with what's going on. You're walking through the parking lot of the grocery store and you see a lady, she's got a 6-month-old baby in her hands. She's got a 3-year-old toddler running around going crazy, and she's got a cart full of groceries. Well, you just walk right past her and you don't even say anything. Right. When I was a kid, my dad would have freaking smacked me upside the head and told me to go help her. We don't do that anymore. So now it's like, I try to show that message of, hey, introduce yourself to your neighbors. You see that lady who needs help? Excuse me, ma'am, can I help you? Yeah, here, hold my kid. Whatever it is, help your community, be more involved, be your grandfather, be that World War II generation of men and women. And that's really how it started. And it's kind of really snowballed in there because I have so many non-natives now understanding and getting involved in MMIW issues, man. which is really cool because most people think when they think natives, they think of a certain look or a certain type, right? Like I'm half, but there's a lot of natives that are like myself that aren't really dark skinned, that do have some facial hair, or
Sure.
women in these areas, and we all look different. So I think that's been another cool experience for all these non-natives to understand what's going on. And I look at the MMIW issue that, especially on Indian reservations, as if we can assist that and really make a dent in that as a community, whether that's from the government side of things with the DIA all the way to grassroots organizations, nonprofits like Sage the Saddle on Pine Ridge that are doing great things for kids. We can really harness this and make a dent in this and improve that community. I think that is a stepping stone and almost a model on how we can improve other communities, whether that's, rural white America and Appalachia that's suffering from, opioid crisis, or you're looking at inner city issues that are suffering from gang violence and drug addiction. So I think, that being said, where there's poverty, there's human trafficking, period. That's hand in hand
Always.
together.
Yeah.
People are looking for a better life. People are looking for a way out. The commonality of, the 16-year-old girl whose their mom's boyfriend comes in their room every night and rapes them and does that. That's black, white, brown, Asian. Doesn't matter. That happens. It's happening right now as we speak in the United States, all over the country. So I look at if we can expose what's going on in the Native community, we can really help that. That will help garner more people in their community to continue to use that. So that was a lot of why I wanted to try to do that. I don't think who knows where it can go, but not saying I'll be able to affect things on a national level, but that was the idea behind starting the Work Party movement. It was to really kind of create force multipliers, just like when I was in Special Forces, to be able to go out there and assist their community and motivate people to assist their community. Fast forward, after doing it for about a year, I realized there was a bigger problem when it comes to actually helping women in need. And that problem is there's nothing to get them on their feet. If you assist a woman and you get her out of a bad situation and she has no family to go to, now you're calling around all these nonprofits trying to figure out a safe house for her to go to or whatever. And you take her there and, it's like a 30-day program that church or that safe house or whatever that provides, they can only assist them for so long.
Right. There's only so much for each bed or each patient or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. And then where that turns into is they're not actually learning. They're not improving their situation. They're not learning a skill set. They're not gaining confidence and trying to regain who they were back.
Right.
So what you end up creating is just another cog in the wheel of it's so hard to break the cycle of abuse and break that cycle of trauma. So we kind of saw that, and my sister and I, she's like the most badass cowboy I know. She's not my real sister, but she has become, like a sister to me. But I do give her the honor of calling her my sister. We started a nonprofit arm of War Party movement called War Party Ranch. And what we do there is through...
So this is a physical property.
Yes.
War Party Ranch. Okay.
Yes. So we have what we do there is we provide skills for women leaving abusive relationships or that have been in abusive relationships. Most of those life skills are, cowboy. Everything's kind of horse related, cowboy oriented. But we also do, like self-defense. We do hunting. We do a lot of things to really create that warrior spirit and that warrior mindset. And then the tangibles of that is, practicals of, if you've never ridden a horse before, and 6 months later, you're out gathering cattle or you're out roping stuff, and you can see that tangible progress, as well as you're healing through nature and these horses and whatnot. And it's the same whether we're doing hunting or we're doing, just general cowboy work. So what we do is we work mostly with women in our local community out of Kiowa, Colorado. But we also have a bigger footprint across the country. We do online training, online therapy. We offer for a lot of women a really, really cool program ran by a Native lady who allows any walk of life, race, religion, culture to study and to heal and to go through your trauma on your own at your own pace. And that's really cool because we don't have to worry about, if you're a Hispanic lady from Texas that's Catholic versus if you're a Black girl who's Baptist from Georgia, or you're a Native girl who's Navajo from Arizona. This lady can help facilitate your healing and coaching you through that therapy, which is really cool. And then another thing we have, another kind of touch point across the country, is we also have a strength conditioning coach who works specifically with rodeo athletes. So we're able to offer that too. So we have a little bit of bigger footprint than just our local community and what we can actually bring into Cuyahoga, Colorado to actually physically be on our ranch. We're very new. I don't know what the hell I'm doing when it comes to running a nonprofit.
That's the best way, dude. Yeah.
And neither does my sister, but we made a lot of mistakes, and we've also done a lot of really, really cool things. And it's really cool to see, the progress of these women and their confidence and what we do. So I've been rambling the whole time, been on this podcast, but that's basically in a nutshell kind of an umbrella of what War Party is, the difference between War Party movement and now moving forward with War Party Ranch.
One thing I've wondered, as I've seen you share, stories about the operations and stuff, is how do you vet a case? Like, so if you're going out to assist a woman, like, how do you, or a child or whatever, how do you vet that case? Like, how do you make sure it's not just like someone throwing up a false flag and doing that? Or do you just take everybody at their word,
No. So a lot of it's been trial and error. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just good. Good in the woods, with a huge backpack on my back. So I it's been a learning process for sure. When it comes to vetting a specific thing, when it comes to women and children, there are some kind of, especially as you understand addicts, sometimes they're manic, right? So if you do have somebody, you try to assess that. Are they a drug addict? Are they an alcoholic? Are they manic? Where is the information coming from? And you basically just turn on your investigator hat and do what we would do. And, when I was in special forces, is you just start building that, you just start basically putting that target package together and figuring out and gathering intel as you go. Oftentimes you can kind of filter through some of the stuff when there are drugs and alcohol involved in that. But when it comes to women and children, for most part, we kind of take them at face value as we get the investigation going and we start rolling with it. Until some like red flags pop up or something like that. But the reality is, again, say a family reaches out where you are, and I send you out to help. We're going to communicate, even if it's your first time doing it. What are you seeing? What's going on? I'd rather send you out there and it not be the real thing than not send you out there and it is the real thing. So I think I hope that answers a little bit. But the reality is the hardest thing that we do at War Party Movement and War Party Ranch is we can't tell the story of the people we assist, the families we assist. Oftentimes they're small, they're on Indian reservations, and it's a very tight-knit rural community where if I just give a little bit of intel on it or try to say, hey, thank you, this is what you guys supported this month, it is very easy to figure out, the lady on Pine Ridge that we helped and exactly who she was. And the reality is that's not for us to tell. And the same with the women we work with on the nonprofit side. I mean, we do have a really cool small documentary coming out that Boot Barn came out and filmed 2 weeks ago. And it was really cool because some of the ladies that were involved in it were willing to tell their story. And, we've been working with them for a year plus. So it was really cool to see these women progress in such a manner that now they are willing to talk about what happened to them and where they are in life and how they got there. But you can't just go out and start trying to share all the good things you do in your community and when it's really not your story to tell. And you're also putting a lot of these women in vulnerable situations. And they're still trying to build their confidence up. So that's the hardest thing we've done on War Party Movement side of it is how do we tell the story? How do we actually do these women justice? So oftentimes what we do is we just don't do anything. We don't need to, try to self-promote, if you will. The ladies and the families we help have our backs, and they've shared enough and continue to share what they're doing in their community as well as how we're assisting them do that.
Damn, high risk storytelling, man.
Yeah,
So,
and then again, and we're not. Also, I do kind of want to put this out there. We're not vigilantes. When I say I'm asking veterans to come out and help, it's not like we're strapping up and getting up and kicking indoors.
Right.
It is very like a lot of it's just kind of a support system. Again, when I say non-natives to actually natives, I've never had a family be upset that a big tattooed white dude with a beard showed up to their house to help them. They were thought it was amazing. Natives to this day are very, very so. Native Americans serve at the highest rate of any race in our country in the United States military. Native veterans are honored and they are warriors, and they're put on a pedestal in the community still, as they should be. So that being said, it's very easy when I tell a family, hey, I got a guy coming to you, this is his background. And they're like, yep, awesome. He's here to help. Because they really do understand what being a warrior and being a soldier are all about. So that is another stepping stone or another really cool piece, I think, that we've been able to offer the community, that I've been able to offer the community from being a veteran myself.
So cool. And I can't wait to see what else you guys do. Where can people find you? Where can people find War Party? Keep up with what you got going on.
Yeah, so War Party, if you just go to warpartymovement.com or warpartyranch.com, or excuse me, .org, they're both kind of interlinked. If you type in one or the other, it'll send you to the website. Excuse me, on social media, we're not real good at Facebook, but Instagram, War Party Movement on Instagram and War Party Ranch on Instagram. And then same myself, I'm Jeremiah_Blackbeard on Instagram. So anybody can reach. We do have a crew that kind of runs the War Party pages, but you can reach out to there. If you're DMing, it might not be me responding. Just kind of give people a heads up, because sometimes I get the "Hey brother" message or whatever, and it's somebody else responded to it.
Yeah,
but
it's always an issue with more people on one account.
Yeah, but me personally, feel free to reach out to me anytime, whether it's just to shoot the shit or ask for advice or fucking tell me I'm fucked up and doing something wrong. It is what it is. I do want to thank you for what you've been doing this month. Really cool to see that. I think honoring our warriors in that manner is special, and I think that a lot of people, especially with how convoluted veterans are, or conflicted veterans are, I should say, with Afghanistan and what we've done in Iraq, and was my service meaningful, and did I do something? Did I, all those things I think that veterans can struggle with, and see the immorality of some of the things we've done on the battlefield. War is a motherfucker, man. One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. Geronimo's last dying words were, "I wish I killed more Mexicans." So we have to understand and accept the fact that war is horrible, right? And I think that a lot of the literature and the books that you have highlighted and those viewpoints of these natives, people say, well, why do natives serve? Why are they doing this? They were colonized. You were sent to boarding schools. All these terrible things happen to you in a country that doesn't love you. Well, that's fucking wrong, and they understand that. They understand that they have to defend North America, Turtle Island.
Yeah.
And they understand that, we are warriors, and what else are we going to do? So I think it's really cool that that you're highlighting that. And I think that a lot of veterans will get a lot out of all those books and literature. I think their stories are really cool. And I think would go a long ways mentally for a lot of veterans struggling with purpose.
Oh, for sure, man. I'm so honored to hear that. We've put a whole bunch of books up there, and not all of them have been entirely related to military history, or military culture, period. Really just kind of, it's, if I had to pick a genre or like a subtopic, like that is the majority of what I read is native authors, native poets. But that Strong Hearts, Wounded Souls one, that I posted the excerpt from Tom Home, that was, just what you're talking about, we as a people, like, we didn't feel like my community, my section of the reservation, we didn't feel like it was our fight at all, but we felt like if we didn't go fight, then it wouldn't have been honorable, and we would have been doing, just as bad as the people who we were calling out regularly. So it's just interesting to understand that. And it's important to understand it, especially when you're talking about, if we're talking about a group of people who serve at a higher rate than any other demographic in the country, then that deserves some understanding and some research into what makes that group tick.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
My man. All right. Well, anything else before we get out of here?
No, sir. I appreciate it. Sorry, I did a little bit of rambling. I was all hopped up on coffee. Been drinking coffee the whole time. So.
All right, Jeremiah Wilber, Warrior Storyteller. Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for what you're doing for the community. It's really cool.
Tell me a story right now. Go.
All right. Well, so it was a real quiet.
You never know. That's the point.